Insight, the stripped back podcast. All about the what, the how, and the why tradespeople do what they do. Get first-hand knowledge and life stories from apprentices to the seasoned professionals. Hear the good, the bad, and the ugly aspects of a tradesperson's life through unfiltered chat, now on Insight, the stripped back podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 4 of Insight, the stripped back podcast. I'm your host Stephen Buckley, and on this podcast I want to highlight the trade industry and the tradespeople that work within it. Tradespeople face various challenges within their profession, and one of the key challenges are the physical demands of the job. Many tradespeople will be working within physically demanding environments that often involves heavy lifting, repetitive tasks and long hours. Another challenge is the ever-changing technology and techniques. With advancements within their respective trades, tradespeople must constantly update their skills to stay relevant and ensure that they can meet the modern demand of their industry. Lastly, attracting and retaining young talent is the most important challenge. With an ageing workforce, it's essential to encourage school leavers to take up a career within the trades. So by inviting guests on to share their journeys and their amazing stories, and by having unfiltered chat about the hot topics within the industry, hopefully we can encourage and inspire the younger generation to consider a career within the trades. Talking about unfiltered, let's get into the next instalment of The Overload.
The Overload, featuring Keith Delahan.
Hello and welcome to another instalment of The Overload, and unfortunately due to a busy work schedule, Keith hasn't been able to join me for the recording of the episode this week, but he will be back next time to do a full run through on how to prepare for an electrical inspection. He'll also be talking about a recent solar panel installation project that he completed, and in the meantime, if you want to hear more about the solar panel installation project, head over to my Instagram page at Insight, Electrical and Podcast to see a couple of videos where Keith details the full installation and how to set up the Sullus inverter unit. And because it's apprenticeship week in the UK this week, I have a very special guest joining me on the Overload segment. She's the On the Tools Apprentice of the Year winner 2023, and she's joining me to talk about the state of the apprenticeship system within the UK at the moment. Welcome, Lizzie Corsten. Lizzie, thanks for joining me on the podcast today. I appreciate it.
No, it's lovely to be here.
I noticed that it's National Apprenticeship Week in the UK at the minute, and I've seen from a couple of your stories on Instagram that you've got a bit of frustration with the apprenticeship system in the UK, and I was just wondering what you have to get off your chest.
Yeah, well, I think the National Apprenticeship Week it's marketed as this happy, wonderful, exciting thing. I mean, obviously it is celebrating apprentices, but the reality is that having and keeping an apprenticeship is really hard. The job security, which I'm currently having to deal with, is non-existent. Your employer can just get rid of you so easily, and then you have to find a new employer to take on your apprenticeship, or you lose the whole thing entirely. So although like my training providers say that they'll support me and they'll help me find a new one, it's been a week and I haven't heard from them. I've not had a thing. I haven't heard from my assessor, nothing. So it just makes you feel completely alone. The government don't support you. They don't have any there's no service really for you to turn to, or there's nothing that's obvious. You're not given any options. You're not given any protection. So yeah, I'm mad, actually. Because...
So in a sense, you could feel quite isolated from the system when you lose a job. And like what you said, you could be waiting over a week, maybe up to a month, just to try and get a start again, which then obviously deflates your confidence. And, you know, only for the fact of Instagram and the community that we have on here, that you can sort of put your voice out there and sort of self-promote yourself to try and get another job. A lot of other apprentices might not have that platform available to them, and they could be just left behind, you know?
Yeah, I agree. I think without the platform, without the community, it'd be so easy to just give up. I have felt like giving up loads recently, and especially this week, and I'm still not entirely sure if I want to keep doing it, but I love the industry and I love the job, so the community really keeps me going. There's so many people who look out for me, not just with the job, like with sort of mental health and stuff as well. So I think for me, the Instagram community of Sparks and other trades is vital, and without it I wouldn't be an apprentice anymore, for sure.
Yeah, I think mental health is a big aspect to take into when, you know, apprentices are looking to be taken under the wing of, you know, companies, and they feel like that they're only a number, you know, and that they're not being guided in a sense of the direction that they're supposed to take, or, you know, when something like this happens, what's the next step that you're supposed to take in order to continue your apprenticeship. And I was through it a lot as well, because I completed my apprenticeship through the downturn in 2008. And like that, I was taken on for 2 week contracts, and then you could be left for maybe 2 months without work. And you
Yeah.
know, it's crazy, because you start to second guess your life choices. And you know, it's only for people that, like, with the likes of Instagram, and at the time, you know, there was a good community around me that was being able to push me on and encourage me to complete the apprenticeship. And I feel like you should do the same, Lizzie, because you've won the On the Tools Apprentice of the Year award, and I think that's a great boost for yourself to be able to just remember that, you know, there is skill within you in order to continue on, you know?
Yeah, I agree. It's a double-edged sword though, because I have that award, but then when you just get let go so easily, it knocks your confidence right out of you straight away. So you think, well, even with this accolade, I'm still not worth keeping. So it can be really hard to keep going. But employers, they just treat you as cheap labor.
Yeah.
I found actually what was really frustrating is that it's all about getting a job finished, not about really teaching you. So how are we supposed to even learn a trade when we're made to do sort of the easier menial tasks, whereas the qualified spark would do the, typically more interesting or more difficult work, and you don't even get a look in it anyway. I've gone off with a tangent now, but that's the other thing that annoys me about apprenticeships.
No, I think I was given a similar story recently from another electrician, who, in Ireland, we work on a phase system of 7 phases. So you start off on site, you'll do a certain amount of time on site, and then you go into a college phase, then you're back out on site, and then back into college, and so on. And
Yeah.
the way it works here is that a lot of companies are taking on apprentices, and they use them, as you said, like cheap labor, and they don't actually promote the training within the company to try and to better these people into learning more, you know. And
Yeah.
by the time they reach their college stage, they end up failing their exams because they haven't been given enough guidance or training through their peers within the company. And then, like what you said, the company lets them go, and it's just a rotation then of taking on the next apprentice and then using them for cheap labor again, which is it's a terrible cycle, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I do feel also from the other side, looking at it as the employer, um, where do you find the time to stop and teach someone when you're trying to get the job done? I get that. This is why I think that the government needs to put a lot more into it. There needs to be so much more incentive. So many people don't want an apprentice because apprentices are expensive, especially for the first year or two. I think for the first year we don't make any money; we just cost money, and then the second year they're lucky if they break even with us. So we need to work, work, work. But how are we supposed to learn as well? Obviously, we learn at home, but on the job is vital.
Yeah, it's tough, and like even people in situations where, they're trying to provide for their family, or they're trying to put food on the table at home, and they're considering, do I keep plugging away at this and going at it, or should I try and divert into a new industry, which is it's very sad, where certain people might have the passion for the technical trades, and they're being forced out due to, like what you said, external circumstances that might be able to be fixed through the government.
Yeah, I agree. I don't really know what the answer is, because it's such a huge problem with so many facets. So where do you start on fixing it? I don't know.
And what industry or sector are you looking to try and move into now? Is it the domestic area that you're looking to try and get a job in?
Honestly, I would love to get into industrial. I've done a fair bit of domestic, especially in the social housing, which was interesting, but it doesn't. I feel like there's so much more out there that could be much more fulfilling and exciting and interesting. So yeah, today I'm applying for loads of jobs.
Well, I'll do my best to share the word around through my Instagram page, Insight Electrical, to hopefully maybe get a bite for yourself, to even get an interview with somebody. And I know you're plugging away, so I wish you all the best, Lizzie, and I hopefully before the month's out, you're back working on the tools again.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Take it easy, Lizzie.
And you.
Right, well, that's just about it for the overload, and I just want to say a massive thank you to Lizzie for stepping in and joining me on the segment this week. Now it's time for our guest interview. My guest today is not only a qualified electrician, he's also a chartered engineer and now the author of his debut book, So You Want to Be an Electrician. He's joining me on the podcast today to share his knowledge and his journey from within the electrical industry. Welcome to the podcast, Gary Alder. Gary, how's it going? I know you're a busy man at the moment with your book release, and I really appreciate it that you've taken time out of your busy schedule to join me on the podcast today for a quick chat.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for inviting me on, and it'd be great to chat with you.
No problem at all. I'm going to try and get as much information out of you as possible while I have you on the podcast. So let's take it back a bit and find out, what kind of student were you when you were in school, and at what point did you know you were going to go into a trade?
Quite late. In terms of being a student, I probably the average student, really. Didn't necessarily enjoy school, but didn't really get the guidance, I think, at the ages of 16 and 18. So I eventually ended up going into a business law degree after doing A-levels. And I think about a month in, I just found it wasn't for me. Basically, dropped it out and took the hit of the loans and everything else that I ended up paying off for the next few years. But it was at that point I evaluated my choices and what I really wanted from a career as such. You're going into the life of work, and making those choices feels like a big decision. So I kind of felt, well, what's something I might enjoy? And it's one of those things where, you have people around you always say, oh, you'll never be out of work with a trade and that sort of thing. And I thought, well, it's kind of plumbing, electrics. Electrics seems to be the more scientific, less messy one. So I thought, well, I'll go and see if I can give that a go and how I get on. And luckily I managed to get an apprenticeship.
So interestingly enough, you ended up with a fork in the road type decision, and you went in a different direction and you chose the electrical apprenticeship. How did you find the overall apprentice experience, and did you prefer the theory or the practical end of it?
I think it was probably a mixture. Probably where I've ended up now, I would probably say, yeah, I do enjoy the theory. I always enjoyed following a spark, particularly on testing and inspection and fault finding and things like that, and finding a problem, or solving a problem, I should say. That was the particular enjoyment for me in the job. And that was when I kind of felt, yeah, you know what, I've picked something I like to do and I can see myself doing. And one of the kind of mantras I always said to myself out of a job was, I don't want to ever have the same day twice. And, you know, certainly being an electrician, I think that's incredibly true.
Yeah, I believe the apprenticeship system within the UK to Ireland is completely different regarding the phases. Did you feel like you got an all-round experience of the industry while you were doing your training, or do you feel like you were pigeonholed into one type of sector?
No, I think I was very fortunate that I worked for a company that had commercial and industrial fingers in all the pies, if you like. So we weren't tied to any particular industry. We were just control specialists, effectively, building and installing control panels, and the electrics kind of came with those. So it was more process driven, and you could one day be in a factory doing a food processing line. The next day you could be on a water treatment works working out the process on there. So it was a very well-rounded experience, I would say, and that probably most in the UK aren't necessarily fortunate enough to have, particularly if you're in the domestic sector. But I think, you know, even that is changing nowadays with the amount of different technology creeping into that market.
Yeah, I get a lot of feedback on Instagram at the moment from apprentices doing their apprenticeship in Ireland about trying to support themselves while they're doing their training, getting themselves digs and finding somewhere to live while they're doing it. Not to get too economical on it, but do you feel like the salary for an apprentice electrician in the UK is one that can support a person looking to live independently and train to get a qualification?
Absolutely not. No. I mean, if you look at what life generally costs, you know, food, rent, the bills, everything else, it just so massive. Unless you're kind of in some sort of sharing arrangement, I think most people, the real advice probably is to start young, I would say, and you consider these career choices at an earlier age. So at 16 is of the most benefit to you. um, you've got more chance and opportunity to save, to build up that income whilst you're building up your experience. You know, earn while you learn was always the thing that was said to me.
Yeah, 100%. I do feel sorry for the latecomers into the industry that have responsibilities and mortgages, and they have a passion to try and follow a trade, and it's the money aspect of it that's holding them back, you know. But if we were to take things back to your apprenticeship, we've come to the end of it. You've got your qualification. What sector did you find yourself end up working in after you qualified?
Predominantly industrial was the basis of the work. So doing lots of work for National Grid and national infrastructure projects and stuff like that, as well as water treatment works. So large scale civils installations, you know, where you're coming in and doing the mica works alongside the civils contractors and delivering a process, you know, for those sites.
And I have followed your podcast, and obviously I have followed you on Instagram, and you're on LinkedIn as well. And I noticed that you moved away from your tools at one point and you took up a project management position. What was the driving factor behind making that move?
I think it was just an opportunity. One of the things I've always tried to do is just say yes. You never know where things might go. And it was initially just, I think I was introduced into the office work, you know, doing reviews of electrical installation condition reports, reviewing various different certification documentation and processing that. Eventually it was kind of like, well, here's a tender, have a look at that. What do you think? Try and put some bits together, not do too bad at it. And then eventually I said, well, okay, let's kind of have a go at project managing. So, you know, incrementally starting with small figure budgets and nothing that's too risky. You know, talking like your 10 grand sort of project, and then eventually getting up to, okay, you know, various different water treatment works throughout the country. overseeing all of those from a tier 2 electrical contractor project management. And it was a learning curve, but I think I really benefited from that gradual introduction.
You mentioned their learning curve, and from working for so long on your tools, did you find that when you were off your tools that you were looking for different type of avenues to try and advance yourself or maybe upskill?
Yeah, so qualifications, it's always ongoing with electricians, so it kind of never stops. There's always something you can train and learn. But I think I always looked up to the people who were above me in the company. So it was, okay, what qualifications have they got to get to where they are? One of those was HNC, so I undertook that for 2 years part-time as I was kind of going through the project management learning curve. The other one was the NEBOSH general construction. So obviously when you're project managing, producing all the safety documentation and having that fundamental understanding of CDM and all those things that go with it are pivotal for not only commercially understanding where you are, but technically and from a safety perspective, making sure everyone gets home at the end of the day. So that was really the two other things during my development as a project manager that I undertook.
And following on and talking about advancing yourself, you then moved on from a project management position into an MD role. Was it something you applied for, or was it offered to you based on your reputation?
So it was probably more to do with circumstance. So the people senior to me left the business, so there was a vacant opportunity there. The owner, I think, rather than maybe conceding or externally hiring, saw the promise in me as a young person. At the time, I was only, I think, 26, so I still had a lot to learn. But obviously, he took me under his wing, and we continued to try and win and run some large scale projects, including like Crossrail at Liverpool Street Station, and there was a fair few others during that time, but that was the one that kind of springs to mind.
And you mentioned there having somebody taking you under their wing, and did that make it an easy transition into the role, or was it a sink or swim situation?
It was very much a sink or swim. I mean, to be fair, the pressure of the role was immediate. It's one of those where the importance of the decisions that you're making on a daily basis can have far-reaching consequences. So you have to think very carefully, but you also have to think very rapidly. And that's not to say I didn't make mistakes, but I think the mistakes are easily forgiven as long as you could justify why you did what you did. And that was one of the key things. I was always fairly sure of myself that if I was potentially going to make a mistake, then that's the time I would seek counsel elsewhere, and even sometimes going to other directors within the business and sounding them out, or other project managers working with myself that, okay, this is what I think we should be doing. What do you think as well? Even if it's just to hear them. I think it's important to always share and listen.
Yeah, it's great to have that network to be able to use as a soundboard. Talking about pressure, were you able to leave the stress of work at the door, or was it a 24/7 situation?
Really, it became a 24/7 thing. I think, the company at the time was a small to medium enterprise, so it had like 30 to 35 staff, and you kind of wear it on your shoulders that these people rely on you to perform for their employment. And if you aren't going to regularly be winning work, contracting work, and putting bread on the table, then they're not going to potentially stay. And then you end up in very sticky situations of not being able to deliver some of the larger contracts we were endeavoring to win. So yeah, it definitely came home with me, not necessarily affecting home life, as I've always tried to have a switch off. Usually, the drive home is the unwind time, and so that you don't bring it through the door, and then turn your phone off to at least give yourself some respite. But yeah, lots of Saturday work and picking up the slack.
Yeah, the the self therapy in the car with Spotify or the music on is a great thing to have. Um, so you moved then into being a self-employed electrician back into the domestic sector. What made you want to make that move?
I think it was an experience that I wanted to do. Being self-employed at the time, I think, was important to me. I wanted my own autonomy. That was one of the things with the previous company, that whilst there was an owner, it was his capital, it was his money. Whilst I can endeavor to do my best with the business, it wasn't my own to do with. I couldn't risk somebody else's money. So whilst it was significantly less, I'd never really, other than, doing private work in the evenings for various electricians throughout the years and doing my own private work, I really hadn't experienced the domestic sector to its full. I was obviously still undertaking large commercial industrial work that I was kind of picking up as well. It was predominantly me in a van, going back on the tools and pushing myself and seeing what I could still do, if you like, because this was, 4 or 5 years after I'd stepped off them.
And from knowing the experience myself from working in industrial and domestic, how did you find the transition from industrial into domestic?
Challenging. It's a different skill set. I don't think necessarily it's probably a stigma, but industrial sparks probably don't give domestic sparks the respect they deserve, because whilst it may not be technically as complex with as many rigorous standards and other things kind of going on with, having control panels and other switch gear around, the techniques, the skills, the little tricks of the trade that you pick up along the way can make a job easy. And it's those little things that I had to kind of retrain my brain on. And if you've got an easy route to the boiler, you can get your bonding in whilst you're doing something else. It's okay, we're under the stairs, we're in an awkward position, what's the best way am I going to get up and out, all those sorts of things. And obviously electric vehicles were coming in just as I was kind of tailing that off. But all these different considerations that you have to make to, first off, design the work, but very seldom do you write it down. You don't put all this into a bit of paper, provide it for a client, sign it off. You've got it all in your head. So you're very much thinking about it all on the go. So yeah, having that as a skill set, I think definitely gave me a lot more, I can't think of the right word, but I think, it gave me a wider skill set for my own knowledge and experience moving forward.
Yeah, another string to your bow, 100%. And I think it's very hard to explain the vast differences between the industrial and domestic sector. But everybody coming from the industrial end to the domestic end, I think, have respect for each other in some sort of way. A lot of our Irish listeners wouldn't know what tideway is, but if you could explain to my listeners what tideway is and how did you end up being involved with it?
So whilst I was working as that domestic spark going round, I picked up a phone call from the good people at Morgan Sindall, who are part of the joint venture delivering the Tideway project. And basically, I think through one person and another, that my CV had been bandied around as having water industry experience, and asked if I would come and join the project. And effectively, the project is the super sewer throughout London. It's stopping all of the overspill from the undercapacity Victorian sewer that we've currently got in London, and it's taking it for processing at a sewage treatment works in East London. So effectively what I'm kind of overseeing is the electrical instrumentation, control and automation of 7 sites throughout West London, which feed into that process and that super sewer. It's definitely a challenge. There's a heck of a lot of stakeholders, but the one thing that really enticed me onto the job was the fact that it's doing a massive service for the River Thames and the environment. And it's something that is a legacy that will last well beyond my years on this planet.
Yeah, congratulations for taking that up. You don't seem like somebody who would shy away from a challenge anyway. How did you go about getting your chartered engineer status?
I think it was one of those things where I was on the role of Tideway, and obviously you have to kind of curate a team. One of the things, you get CVs coming across your desk, and a lot of the people that I was looking at were chartered engineers. And I kind of thought to myself, well, there's a lot of respect that's gained through being a chartered engineer. And obviously, if I was to go and apply for this role, I might not get it because I'm competing with these guys who've got this this status on their CV. So effectively, I kind of went to the IET. I had a good look. I spoke to various people throughout the industry, including some of the E5 guys, and they kind of pointed me in the right direction. And I just kind of went from there. I got a registration advisor who I'll give a shout out to, Mandy Beer, at the IET, and they were just really supportive. And whilst the whole process can seem very daunting, and you have to write, a good essay on your career and how you've progressed your engineering knowledge throughout the years, it's invaluable once you've gone through it. And I think it definitely can shine a light and maybe even give you confidence, because it did for me.
Interesting, and congratulations on that as well. It's another amazing achievement to have. I have been getting a lot of questions asking why I'm doing this podcast, and I try to explain to people my reasoning behind, highlighting the industry and trying to give people as much information as possible in regards to coming into the industry as an apprentice, and hopefully giving them a stepping stone into it. What was your goal behind setting up your Hit the Lights podcast?
I think it's very similar. It's to share, really. When I was coming into the industry 18 odd years ago, YouTube was barely a thing, podcasts weren't a thing, and there was no medium at which you could obtain readily knowledge other than the people necessarily within your business or that you had contact with maybe on a mobile phone texting. So it was something where I kind of thought, well, I'd like to share not only my own stories and journey, but I want to share others. And really the intent was to get as wide range a group of people onto the podcast as possible. So whilst there's industry experts, there's loads of apprentices. I was, fortunate enough to have an IET president come on during his time as well. And really it's just explain where the industry is at, how they came to it, and show the different routes and journeys we can all have. We're not all experts in a specific field or matter. We're very widespread. The technology is numerous, and you can be in any number of subsectors to the electrical industry. And yeah, it was just to try and promote it and draw people in.
When I announced that I was going to have you on the podcast, I put some suggestions out on Instagram to the listeners to see what questions they would like me to ask you. I got a few of them back, and if you're interested, would you like to answer a few of them?
Yeah, definitely.
Great. So I'll start off with the first one, and it's, how do you see the grid being affected by the increasing amount of car chargers in operation?
I mean, 100% it will be affected. I don't think there's any getting by that. Certainly you see some of the propaganda out there. The networks haven't been upgraded substantially and invested in within, the last number of, certainly I'm going to say decades. The loads we're talking about, particularly when people want rapid charging, are incredibly high. Nobody really, certainly on local street residential areas, is going to have necessarily access to 3-phase rapid charging. So we're all going to be charging at home. We're all going to be charging at night. And there's every chance that people are going to wake up and their car's not charged. I think it's part of the solution of the future, but I don't think it's the solution. So I think some of these other technologies that are slowly creeping up behind, such as hydrogen and various other technologies that will soon follow, I'm sure, will be other alternatives to the electric vehicle solution.
Yeah, 100%. I agree that it's definitely a stepping stone, and I would have some reservations about these threatened blackouts that some people are saying are going to happen. We'll move on to the next one, and it's: is there any advice you could give to somebody looking to scale their business from small to large?
Well, that's an interesting one. I think don't get too deep financially too quickly would be my advice. It's very easy, you kind of think about all the credit we have to take on as businesses. So the various wholesalers, all the materials, all the labor that we front up for jobs, particularly if you're going to scale within the commercial and industrial sector, you may not get paid for 30 days. On some instances on contracts I've delivered, it's 90 days. So that 3 to 4 month period can break you. And I think when you overcommit too readily without having the proper cash flow to support yourself for that period, I think that's probably one of the biggest factors of having foresight financially. It would be the main piece of advice.
Right, the next one is a bit niche. Can you explain ATEX static bonding?
That is a very specific question. Yeah, so when you have ATEX hazardous areas, obviously you can't have sparks, you can't have flashes, and otherwise you're going to end up with some big explosions. So one particular installation that I undertook was at a food processing. They have these barrels of what is effectively like the powder that goes into energy drinks and stuff like that, and it would be loaded up onto this like barrel system, and it would be the lid effectively would be compressed on for transportation, and that is the prime opportunity for a spark to occur because it's being put onto machinery, it's in connection with the main earthing system, and then someone else is going to move it, touch it, handle it, whilst potentially being insulated from that system. So what the ATEX static bonding did was give points around the building and particular workstations where the machinery or yourself would touch it, so that you're removing all of that energy from the system and therefore removing the opportunity to spark in a hazardous area.
Right, very well explained. The next one is: you are now an author and you have a book out called So You Want to Be an Electrician. Can you tell us a bit about the book?
Yeah, so it's similar to the podcast, really. It's sharing the opportunities that are available to you as an electrician. It's not just kind of talking through the apprenticeship and the working as an electrician. It kind of diverges and goes in all directions to talk you through all the options that are available to you. So, touching on the commercial, the industrial, the domestic, the businesses, all the different taxes, the legal statuses, what you're going to expect and encounter in terms of regulations, the legislation. And really it's just kind of, there was nothing out there that put it all in one book succinctly to tell you what life was like as an electrician. And I just kind of thought, well, why not? I'll give it a go and see if I can put it together. And yeah, it's taken me a couple of years, but finally managed to get there, and hopefully going to print in the next few days.
Yeah, congratulations. You must be very proud of that. And if somebody was looking to pick up a copy of your book, where could they find it?
So it's on www.theelectbook.co.uk.
Brilliant. And we've come to the end of the interview now, unfortunately. And I have one last question to ask you. and I'm putting together a season 1 playlist, and each guest is going to get to choose one song to go on it. What would your song of choice be?
So I'm really into the new Frank Carter album at the moment. So I'm going to say A Dark Rainbow by Frank Carter and the Rattlesnakes.
Brilliant, brilliant. Look, thanks very much for sharing your insight and your journey with me today. I wish you and whatever projects you have planned for 2024 all the best of luck. And now I'm going to play you out to your song choice. Thanks, Gary.
Thank you very much.
So that's just about it for episode 4. I'd like to thank Gary and Lizzie for joining me on the episode today. If you liked what you heard, come back next time for another installment of The Overload, and I've got Electrical Apprentice of the Year 2023, Kerry Fitzgerald, joining me to chat all things electrical. So head over to wherever you get your podcast and like and follow to be notified when the next episode drops. Take it easy, everyone.